Hi again, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the MarquetteHoops.com basketball show. With the incredible John Dodds, my friend and colleague, I'm Tom Pippins. Our wonderful producer is Jason Ruck, and we are delighted to be with you. Of course, the MarquetteHoops.com basketball show is brought to you by Moonlight Graham, Modern Dental Benefits. Moonlight Graham, proud sponsor of the program, and boy, do we appreciate Craig Caston. He's our key player. We had Steve the Homer True, the legendary Marquette announcer, of course, and still has a show. He's with Tony Smith, the former Marquette star, went to the NBA out of Tosa East, and it seemed as if Homer covered all the key players, be they coach or otherwise, in the history of the program, at least as we know it over the last 30 years.
Sure, he gave us enough info to have a second show today, and we'll have future segments during the summer. But today we'll go over his comments on Jimmy Butler, working with Tony Smith, Jim McElvain, conversations with Mike Dean. He'll throw in some Buzz Williams. So we're going to have a lot of really interesting information over the next couple of shows.
Yeah, he'll be running into the summer, which is outstanding. All right, tee it up with Steve the Homer True.
Kalkbrenner, I was talking to people from Creighton when they visited, and Kalkbrenner had mono, I think, at the time, and was playing. So I said, "What's the situation there?" And they said, "We think he's gone." And I thought, "Whoa!" And he had kind of an off year, but that would be a guy that if he's there at the end of the draft for the Bucks, take a flyer on someone like that if he's still there at 58. And groom him to be Brook Lopez's, because he's probably about 75 pounds less than Brook Lopez, but he's got a lot of the traits that Lopez does.
Yeah, he can shoot. He can, and have to gain. He's a very good shot blocker. Yeah, I like that. You should get an assistant GM. I hope they listen to you more than when I told them to trade down and get Jimmy Butler.
Yeah, tell Pip that story. But
well, no, I told John Hammond, trade down. His kid's going to be a great pro. And at the last banquet, I wanted to make sure it was on tape. So get out the Marquette banquet. And we finished. It was at the end. And I said, I know nobody's listening, but I want this on tape. Kemba Walker just won the national title for UConn. He's going to be a great pro. Jimmy Butler's going to be better.
You called
And
him.
one other thing. Jimmy, can I be your aide? Right. And now I walk back where he is, and he goes like, "Oh, come on." Like, no one believes in you more than I do. That was the end of that, so I wouldn't be here today. I'd have been higher up on the food chain.
Did you see greatness, probably Hall of Fame greatness, though, at that time?
From Jimmy? No, I just knew that he was the best defensive player we'd ever had, and guarded everyone, so he could guard. The only guy I didn't guard is, who's the 7'6" guy from UConn? Who was the guy? I forgot his name.
the beat?
Hashif the Beat. And I asked Buzz can you have Jimmy guard him? And I think Buzz's lines were, "Have you been drinking?" I said, "No, he's guarded every player, good player. Whenever a decent player was scoring and Buzz and called timeout, Mac and I would go, we know who Jimmy's guarding." And so he said, "I'm not doing that." And so Jimmy tells me, he said, "Oh, by the way, I did guard Fabit." I go, "Jimmy, I did every game. You never guarded Fabit, maybe on a switch." But so he could, and then he was the only player. I said, "You got to miss more shots." When I did and that might be on the TV interview too, not that one, and he said, "What are you, crazy?" I go, "No, you pass up on shots that end up being better than the shot we get." His decision-making like that was so good and still is really good. So no, there was no question to me that he was going to be a great NBA player, and nobody else believed it. I didn't say the Bucks should take him. I said you can trade down and take him. But no, did I think he would be a Hall of Fame player? No.
They have a play-in game, the Heat, right? And as we record here, they're looking at taking on Boston for a spot in the NBA Finals against either the Lakers or Denver. And he obliterated the Bucks, right? And Steve, that 56-point performance was obviously one of the greatest in history, postseason play in the league. I just was astounded how great he was. It was Jordan-esque. It reminded me of Jordan.
It was.
That's exactly what it was. Yes, it was like Michael Jordan. And Tony Smith always talks about it with Giannis and saying he would have liked
Yep.
And Tony goes, "That's not how it works. Giannis, you want to guard Jimmy, you just go guard Jimmy. And they're not going to tell you can't do it." I go, "How do you know that?" He goes, "It happened all the time in the pros. Not all, but often. when Magic, whatever, like whenever the play was, he said, we break the huddle. And Magic, you go, give me the ball.
Right.
Jim Calhoun, the Hall of Fame coach for UConn, would say Marquette is our toughest opponent because our whole offense is geared on Kemba Walker being doubled and then his teammates being open to cut and do things. He said, when we play Marquette, Jimmy Butler guards him one-on-one and everybody else has a man on him and we don't know what to do. It just hurts our offense. When I was working this year, I was working for Miami Heat radio, just doing stats and no big deal. But when Jimmy Butler made that tip-in crazy shot to put it in overtime, I wrote down 5 minutes of free basketball courtesy of Jimmy Buckets. And I gave it to the guy, and he looked at it. 5 minutes. It was the only time I've ever given a line to look.
Every word of it.
Right. Exactly.
He had game winners for Marquette.
Oh, yeah. He had that game winner was
And against UConn.
UConn, right? The last second shot against UConn. That team won 3 consecutive overtime games on the road, and every game, every possession was a fight in that buzz era. Jimmy Butler was interesting in that he would be very modest when he came here. He would know his place and didn't want to do anything until he figured it out. And we had the March or the Midnight Madness deal where he came in as a sophomore. He was a JUCO transfer, and you didn't even notice him. You would have thought he was a walk-on. He didn't do anything. I thought, wow, maybe he was Joe Fultz's roommate. Maybe Buzz threw him a bone or whatever. And son of a gun, he got in the games, and then he would rebound the ball, and instead of putting it up, he'd look for one of the triplets and let them. And so the triplets kind of embraced him then, and once they embraced him, at the end of that year, he took it over at the end.
Yeah, I don't know his mentality, but I think it's accurate that when Buzz was announced as the Marquette coach, the first thing he did was call Jimmy Butler and offer him a scholarship.
Was it a McDonald's or something? He was in a McDonald's when he connected and he signed a contract. What's the story there?
He's saying he wasn't a McDonald's All-America and he signed his McDonald's. That's what Buzz always used to
He'd
say.
never been here.
Yeah.
He signed and said, I'm coming.
Yeah.
Had never been to Marquette.
Right. What a player. He did that in the NBA. The Bulls drafted him, and for about 3 or 4 days, nothing. And he's just kind of figuring it out, helping everybody else out. And then everybody around him started liking him. And then he took over. Larry Bird did that at Boston. Took him 3 days. And people are saying, boy, he's not even, I don't even notice him. And then all of a sudden, the 4th practice was like Hall of Fame.
Yeah, no, he did this in the playoffs once before, but to do it a second time makes it just stand out. Like you just had that year and he's not Jimmy, he's playoff Butler.
Yeah.
Rather,
yeah. That's what the great ones do, right? Yeah. Take it to another level. There are so many different ways we can go, and we just appreciate your time here to talk about the history of Marquette basketball. My friend, you are a treasure. You mentioned Buzz Williams. I say Buzz Williams, first words that come to mind.
Just an incredibly good coach. Like I said, Sweet 16, Elite 8 in 3 straight years. No one ever did that. I mean, there's, the run of Al McGuire was fantastic, but I mean, there's nothing even close to that. And they did it 3 years in a row, and so he can coach, and he's proved it since. So you're going to win with Buzz Williams, and somebody else can figure out. I'll defer to the historian, like what his particular style is. I mean, it was always a toughness, but you can't be tough and win because then all of a sudden you see those teams, they can't score, and his teams can score. And I would love, like when we played USC and they had Kevin O'Neill as coach, who was a great, to me, defensive coach, but one team could score, and that was Marquette, and the other team couldn't, and the game wasn't that close. And I thought that's a part of Buzz's coaching that probably didn't get attention because everybody just talked about how tough the team was.
Different personality than Shaka, but did players connect, guys, I'll ask both of you this, with Buzz Williams the way that the current players do?
Other than his last group, I think that's why he left. The last group, they didn't buy into, like, we don't want to work that hard. And so I think he left. I've always felt he left partly because he knew they weren't going to win. Like Vanderbilt didn't come back, but the other kids were pretty highly ranked. It might have been his highest ranked class, but they just didn't play with the same intensity. And I don't know what he would say. He said he coached saying they just didn't listen. And like, hey, I went Sweet 16, Elite 8. We didn't make the tournament, and I'm not sure he believed they were going to make the tournament the next couple of years. And all of a sudden, they're going to wonder about me.
Right. Vanderbilt left unexpectedly, as you just said. That I thought that killed them, because you could then bring Jake Thomas off the bench, and then you could have Derek Wilson as your point guard and Vanderbilt as your two guard, kind of a combo.
Right. Vanderbilt was at Marquette 3 years. Sweet 16, Elite 8.
Yeah.
That's all you need to know about Vanderbilt.
Yeah. If they could have just they couldn't get the ball into Jameel Wilson or to Devontae Gardner, which is unfortunate. Buzz was always the mad scientist. I remember Steve Cottingham, was the AD for a portion of the time after Bill Kors left, said that Buzz was the most tightly wound guy he'd ever met. And I said, well, give me the example. He said, well, we're working with him to be a little bit looser. He said he plots out every 4 minutes of his day what he's going to do. And we've got him is every 10 minutes of the day. So he would do that. He'd have that boot camp where I think they called it boot camp because everybody was in a walking boot with a stress fracture at the end of it. It was incredible. But then they would bring the cameras in, and then it would be, he'd say, Junior, Tekazuga, Junior, I know you're hurting, but look at Chris O'Toole. He's hurt more. Go up to him. Cheer him on. So it was kind of like getting the troops to go up Pointe du Hoc on D-Day. By the end of the time, he had them molded where they would do it under German resistance, but it was a lot of work, and it was incredible amount of effort.
No, it was hard.
Yeah.
And I would add this about Shaka, that we did kind of a group chat in the banquet this year. And I asked them, so if one of these people in the group has a kid that wants to play at Marquette and play for Shaka, what are you going to tell them? And almost as a group, they all said, it's hard. And I thought, it really wasn't the first thing I expected. He relates, no, they wanted to make it clear.
Yeah.
It's hard. And yet, the mark of a good coach, none of them complained. None of them, they all talked about hard. Fine. Yeah. But I don't know if that's a reflection of what people think of Shaka, listening to him and everything, and its players and stuff like that. But they wanted to make it clear. So I think while they're different people, I suspect that Shaka doing things and what he demands of the players in terms of effort is probably pretty similar to Buzz. Then they executed it in a different way.
Yeah, Buzz said, John, I came from the wrong side of the tracks. I didn't come in through the NCAA to the blue chip. I came in through JUCO. Those are so that's where I recruit. He could call Jay Crowder up with a cold call around Christmas, and by February 1st, Jay Crowder was Marquette's my number one guy.
This JUCO thing, I just wonder, the belief people had is just not accurate. Buzz was always beating the system. Like Jimmy Butler was a JUCO, but didn't have to be a JUCO. He didn't like the scholarship offer that he got it in, so he went JUCO. DJO, great player. He was a JUCO, but he didn't have to go to JUCO. So people have an idea of, kids are JUCO because they struggle academically. No, he picked people, and picked, in those cases, two very important JUCOs that by the definition of what people would say weren't really JUCOs. They just didn't get what they wanted.
So there's a little chip.
There's a bit of chip, but there's also, that doesn't mean they're who people think they are in terms of, with JUCOs, you worry about them academically or whether it's, no, these kids, and who knew that? Buzz Williams knew that. So those that he selected, and the two of his biggest JC players really shouldn't be called JC players. They chose to go there only because they couldn't get a D1 scholarship they thought was good enough or didn't get one.
Yeah, well, Butler, I think, had Rider College and some other one. He thought he could do better.
Right.
Yeah.
And DJO, I think everybody thought he had to be there 2 years in JUCO, and only Buzz knew it, so he got him before anybody else.
Well, listen, Buzz had that quirk where he would send 40 to 200 letters every day to his network, just to thank people for helping him out. And so, well, I got a letter from Buzz. So it was like Amway. It was like a pyramid that he would build this network. So he got a tip that DJO had passed the clearinghouse about a week before everybody else did. So he goes down, he said, so he took
Which meant he was eligible the next year.
Yes, he was eligible the next year, and nobody knew about it. So he took the company plane and came down and said, we know you're eligible. We know you're signing. You should sign with us. Well, I want to wait till, no, we want you. That's why we're here. Nobody else is here. So he signs with Marquette or whatever he did. And I remember Jimmy Ganser, IWB from our board, was interviewing Jimmy Butler that after he signed. And so we're getting an article for our website, and then the call waiting would come on. It's like, oh, excuse me, I got to take a call. That was Coach Self from Kansas. Would you tell him that I signed with Marquette? And then so Jimmy was talking a little bit more, and there's a call waiting. Oh, that was the coach from Pittsburgh. Jimmy Butler? No, this is DJO. This is DJO. So I don't know. Did I say Jimmy Butler? But yeah, DJO. So DJO was in the demand, but it was Buzz's early warning network gave him the tip, and that's what it takes.
Well, and I'm upset at DJO more than any other player because he's a lefty, and they told me he could shoot right-handed. So the last year we did the TV interview, I had him shoot every shot right-handed, and no one even noticed. No one said it. So I told him, you could be the greatest ambidextrous shooter ever. I said, you'll be and he never did it. Yeah. I mean, he's done reasonably well, but I thought, I've never seen a player. Like, you'd bring the ball up the floor, and they'd go, DJO, which way is he going to go? What do you mean? No, which hand? Yeah. Because he can shoot it left or right. I'm like, I don't know if they're
around basket.
Right, but I mean, I had him shoot 15-foot jump shots the whole time. Everyone was right-handed. Check the tape. Yeah. And I just thought, to me, it was purely entertainment. But wouldn't that make you're unique? I don't know if has there been any other player. I mean, Simmons was crazy when we saw him at LSU because he'd shoot and free throws were. We predicted craziness there, but in terms of like saying, guys coming up, what's he gonna shoot, lefty or righty? DJO would have had two stats: left-handed shooting or right-handed shooting. You have been like.
ESPN had that sports science show, and I think they've cut back on expenses, but they put the little sensor in DJO, and they said, here is DJO from Marquette, 22 miles per hour. He was dribbling the ball, running up and down the court. So he was amazing. And yeah, I think his biggest game for Marquette was when he scored 28 against UWM in a real nip and tuck game at the arena. And Marquette really won that to keep that win streak alive, or that all-time record. But that was DJO. That was a great get by Buzz.
Yeah. Yes, and again, it was not the way people would talk about it or think about it.
And I think he was the MVP of the TBT team 2 years ago when they won it, when Diener hit that shot.
Yeah, no, he's not as special as he would have been. Come on, what would you say? Hey, Marquette, who they got? They got that guy that shoots with both hands.
Yeah. Aside from Dwayne Wade, who's in a stratosphere all his own, again, approaching 25 years as the voice of Marquette University basketball on the radio, who are your top 2 or 3 players to get to know and to watch their games?
I mean, we talked about Jimmy Butler just because he was so good defensively. I think it's partly because working with Jim McElvain, but the Tony Miller, that just how good that team was. But Matt just says, we're nothing without Tony Miller. And there may be other players that talk in certain ways like that. Travis Diener was special because I called him the teenage assassin And then his freshman year, I get a call in April. Hey, Homer, you can't call him the teenage assassin anymore. I go, sure I can. No, you can't. He's not a teenager. I go, what? He's 20 years old already. Travis, when are you going to get your Social Security benefits for your
Two decades plus later, he's starting to look like an adult. He still has the youthful look.
So
You were saying, I'm sorry.
no, I'd have to.
Yeah.
Those are the things you ask Dutch because I don't remember it well. No, I'll add one more, and it's Tony Smith.
Yeah.
I mean, Tony Smith was so good. Like they did a thing on Twitter. He laughed at Homer doesn't think I played defense or didn't know, and I admitted it. I never watched him on defense because he had one of the greatest offensive seasons of any player. It was Dwayne Wade like. And I remember the end of the year going, Tony, you carry this team longer than my mom carried me. They had nothing. They had nothing. And as I would emphasize, offense is not necessarily Kevin O'Neill's strength. They had a good offense there because it was give the ball to Tony Smith and get the hell out of the way. And I claim, Tony wouldn't confirm this, that Kevin told me the offense was this. He told Tony, look, when you get the ball, shoot whenever you want. Now, if they double team you, consider throwing the ball to the other person. You have to throw it to the other ball. And he may have been so good defensively because I never watched it. And, Gary Payton he scored 44 one night, 43 a couple nights later. They make the NIT and play at Penn State. But you can look back as dominant a season as any player has ever had at Marquette, and that equals Dwayne Wade. And unlike Dwayne Wade, Tony didn't have Travis Diener, and he didn't have Steve Novak and Robert Jackson. I'm not going to mention who he had.
Yeah, I consider him the most improved player ever at Marquette from start to finish. In the years past, he would not like it when I told him that because he said I was good right away. But when he was on a couple weeks ago, he did admit that when he started, I would go to a practice. Bob Duquette was there. That was his first year. And Tony was the two guard. And he was unbelievable. He could jump out of the gym as a two guard, but he couldn't dribble. Duquette was like, give it to Pop Sims, give it to Kevin Johnson, I think it might have been on the team. He'd say, give it up. And he wasn't he couldn't dribble that well, which Duquette saw. And 4 years later, I was at a Bucks-Laker game in Los Angeles, and he was the starting point guard for the Lakers when Magic Johnson blew a hammy in practice that day. And I said, that is the greatest improvement ever. And then you talked about Mac. Mac is right up there on my top 5 of all time because if you looked at the way opponents would act around McElvain, they would be sitting there all of a sudden, where is he? They just look, wherever Mac was, he would intimidate them with shot blocks, and he blocked them like Bill Russell did. He wouldn't send him into the third row. He'd tip it to himself, which is a very unique talent. He was amazing.
Studied it that much. And he came when we were doing the games. There was some practice, and Wesley Matthews, Steve Jarrell, Dominic, and he went to one of the shoot-arounds because they didn't know that is he really that good? He was like swatting every shot. By the end of the shoot-around, and I actually never go to the shoot-arounds, but I went, they're like throwing the ball up before they go, just to see how high they could. They could not believe that at whatever age he was then, he was still that good. I wanted to say one other thing about Tony. He will not say this, but having get to know, Marquette is so lucky that he played here and stayed here, but he played here for one reason and one reason only, so that it would be as easy as possible for his mom to watch him play.
Yeah.
Because I go, Tony Madison said, further than there. And after 3 years, there's nobody who had seen him play, why doesn't he transfer? He was never going to transfer because wherever he transferred, it would be too far for his mom to watch him play.
Yeah. We talked about his mom, how close they are.
Right. Tony Smith, there's no chance he plays here except for the fact that if his mom had moved, Tony's gone.
Yes. Just if I may, a quick comment about Jimmy Mack, and I know you're aware of this, Homer, that a lot of people, he was awkward, he's a plotter, that kind of thing. Kevin O'Neill said he's going to make a lot of money in the NBA, and by golly, he did.
I've told him that this, so he won't bet. I saw him in high school. because I wanted to see him play. Actually, I'd gone to see Damon King. It was Marquette against it, and he's on the defensive end. And I couldn't believe it. He was the most graceful shot blocker I'd ever seen. I thought of Bill. It's like this guy's this tall.
Yeah.
Then he'd go on the offensive, and he's a big white stiff. And yet you'd go on the other side. And I mean, graceful is the way to describe him blocking shots. And even in high school, and it was
too, right?
incredible the difference from one half of the court to the other.
I want to circle back to Tony Smith. You're always having fun. It is a joy for you to do games, Homer. But what has Tony Smith meant to you, both on your radio show and in the booth, not only professionally, but personally?
He's just incredibly loyal. I mean, I didn't know him that well. But I understand kind of what he is, who he did it. And yeah, he's he's a special person. Good basketball players are all different. George was one way, Mac was one way. They can be all different, but in whatever they do, they carry themselves with a certain strength about how they do stuff. And I mean, they're just three great players, but three great people. And Tony doesn't change his opinion much. Whatever you've got, it ain't changing much. He's convinced I make stuff up on a regular basis.
That's why he's the perfect cohort for you.
I gave up trying to get him to change, but I've said this to him, and there was no LeBron James, but when I was working in Appleton, the year that Kurt Portman won the title, they made the Final Four. We had followed Nina, and so had luck. But I went to the state, and he was at Tosa East. And I said at the time, that's the greatest high school player I've ever seen.
That's Steve the Homer True, brought to you by Moonlight Graham, proud sponsor of the MarquetteHoops.com basketball show. Moonlight Graham, modern dental benefits. Appreciate them. And as you say, Homer is just a treasure, isn't he?
He really is. He's a great resource on the court and off the court for Marquette and the community.
Absolutely. All right, you've got a website. We love promoting it because it's first class, John Dodds.
Well, thank you for that, Pip. It's MarquetteHoops.com. It's part of the 24/7 sports network owned by CBS Digital. So if you look at the top left-hand corner there, you can see a link to all our archived TV shows. If you want to watch this show or other shows, please go there. Also, if you go down a little bit more in the left-hand column, you can add to our newsletter. Just drop your email address in that widget. It might take you twice to do it. I don't know why we haven't been able to get that bug out, but we can send you updates as far as breaking stories on Marquette basketball and future guests.
I'm biased, but that is first class. For John Dodds and our producer, Jason Ruck, I'm Tom Pippins. Thanks for tuning in to the MarquetteHoops.com basketball show, brought to you by Moonlight Graham, proud sponsor of the program. Moonlight Graham and Craig Caston, modern dental benefits. Until next time, thanks for tuning in, everybody. God bless, and go Golden Eagles.